Hello and welcome to the Guitar Hang Podcast. I'm your host, John Stancorb. Today we're kicking off Season 8, Episode 1 with a true legend of melodic cinematic guitar playing, Steve Rothery of Marillion. Steve and I talk about his brand new project Bioscope, which is a collaboration with Thorsten from Tangerine Dream. Their debut album drops this summer through earMusic, and if you head over to Marillion's Racket label, you can pre-order the CD version right now, the first 500 copies signed by Steve himself. The album also features Elbow's Alex Reeves on drums, whose performances across the record Steve describes as fantastic. The vibe of the record is immersive, atmospheric, and beautifully crafted, and in this episode Steve shares the stories behind the sessions, from Berlin to his home studio and right up to the final mastering touches at Abbey Road Studios. We'll also catch up on what's happening in the world of Marillion as the band's been out delivering their epic weekend live events across the Netherlands, Canada, and France, with stops in Italy, the UK, Germany, and Norway. And while fans may have to wait until 2026 for a new Marillion studio album, Steve fills us in on where things are heading creatively. Grab your favorite guitar, kick back and settle in. This is the Guitar Hang Podcast, Season 8, Episode 1 with Steve Rothery. Good to see you.
Hey, how are you doing?
Excellent. So are you fresh from Abbey Road, working on your project?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we did the vinyl mastering on Thursday.
Yeah.
Sounds fantastic. So yeah.
Excellent. Are you at liberty to discuss the project? I know it's, in its...
Well, it's actually going to be announced next week. When is this going out?
I would put it out after it goes out, just to not interfere with...
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm doing the... basically, the way it's working, there's like a soft release to like the fan base, the Marillion and the Tangerine Dream fan base. The pre-orders will start next week, and those first CDs will ship out sometime in early May.
Okay.
And then it will be in the retail around the world through it's the same record company that Marillion use, either end of July or early August, probably.
Oh, wonderful. And since this will be coming out after its release, can you give some background of it's a very exciting new thing for me, so I'm sure everybody's going to be interested.
It's been 6 years nearly since we first started the project. It's gradually evolved over that time. I've been over to Berlin several times to work with Thorsten. We did one session at the Marillion studio at the Racket Club in 2020. I've done some further recording at home, and I was over there in December to try and finish it, and we pretty much managed to. So we then had Alex Reeves, Elbow's drummer, come in and play on it, and he did an incredible job. And just blew us away. I mean, he did the whole album in 2 days with an extra day editing, and he sort of transformed it.
Yeah. It's difficult when you're so close to a project to come up with superlatives to describe these, connections of different worlds, but it'd be interesting to get your initial take at this point in the project,
It's like when two worlds collide, really. We kind of got that Venn diagram thing happening where we cross over at certain points. And I remember listening to Tangerine Dream when I was sort of 17, Ricochet and Stratosphere, I think, were the albums I listened to. And obviously the lineup's changed over the years, but Thorsten is kind of the keeper of the flame for Tangerine Dream these days, and he's an incredible musician and writer and a master of that whole analog technology.
Yeah,
really. So we share a lot of influences. I mean, he loves Marillion. He's grown up listening to us, and as well as all the classics, the Pink Floyd, Genesis, etc. So we speak the same language, but obviously his with Tangerine Dream, they kind of cross over it a lot more into electronica, even a little bit into sort of modern dance, where my roots are very much in the kind of the prog side of things. But I love that some of that music. I mean, Vangelis, things like the Blade Runner soundtrack is one of my favorite
Oh yeah.
things to listen to. So, if you can imagine little bit of that, a bit of Pink Floyd, a bit of whatever it is that I do, and yeah, it's a really interesting marriage of the two things.
Yeah, it reminds me of that metallic spheres thing that David did with Youth and Alex Patterson of the Orb. That kind of
Yes, yeah, it's similar to that, I suppose, in some ways, but I think it's very much its own thing. I can't imagine anyone else doing what we've done between the two of us on this record. And it's one of those things that, people either come out and they'll love it or they won't. And you never know really if it's going to sell 5 copies or 500,000. But I mean, you just make the best record you can make and try and come up with something interesting that isn't just you know, a trodden road really. And I think that's what we've done. There's some really interesting guitar sounds and phrases. Um, in one of the sessions we did, I used the Meris Enzo pedal a little bit, and in the recent sessions for this album, I used the Eventide H90, which has got some fantastic sounds from a whole kind of sound design perspective. That was a lot of fun to do. You hear things on the record, you think, "Hey, what is that? Is that a keyboard? Is that a guitar?"
yeah.
You know. So I like that. I like that kind of ambiguity in terms of who's making what sound.
Yeah, I think that's what we admire about your playing is that you have layers of pedal, whether it's the adrenaline and using different choruses and different layers where you don't know, but it
Yeah,
a project like this, besides bringing two worlds together and doing a cross pollination of fans of one thing and fans of the other and bringing them together, it just leads you into a more creative space because you're freer to think outside your normal role in Marillion.
exactly. Yeah, and it's a lot of this is quite sort of cinematic. I can imagine a lot of it working really well in a film soundtrack. So who knows? Maybe that's something we could possibly do in the future. I mean, Tangerine Dream have got a lot of soundtracks in their past. A lot of computer game music. They were one of the people that did the music for the last Grand Theft Auto game,
Yeah.
which has sold more copies than anything of any kind, game, album, whatever. I think it's for like 100 million copies or something. They sold of Grand Theft Auto 5. So who knows? Who knows with the path that this will take us down? But I thought it would be a good idea to give the project a name that it could kind of rather than just calling it, Rothery Quaeschning or whatever, to call it Bioscope and try and give it an identity. So hopefully we can do a second or even third album down the road, but also we can hopefully play live as well.
Yeah. That would um, this probably won't make the final cut, but our good friend Jonathan Mover sends his best.
How's Jonathan these days?
He's wonderful. He and myself and Mike Keneally and Tony Franklin and some other folks are working on doing a Pink Floyd ambient thing for
Oh, cool.
the domes, and they're building some domes in San Francisco where they do. It's like the Sphere in Las Vegas,
All right.
and
Wow.
a gentleman named Gowdy that does some really ambient cool stuff. So we're bringing kind of mixing the Floyd stuff with some interludes using theremin and all sorts of electric
Right.
samples and that kind of stuff. So it's a cool new project. So it's kind of coincidental that we're talking about this because, back the original roots of Tangerine Dream and or Pink Floyd Hawkwind, they were all kind of coming from the same space, but we're just moving in different commercial directions, perhaps, or more ambient film-like things. So but they all
Yeah.
have the same tentacles, or this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of working outside the contemporary sort of pop or even rock format. and trying to do something that is quite visual, I think. I remember, I listened to Hawkwind. I think Hawkwind is one of those bands, maybe because Dave Brock is very good at what he does, but it was maybe easier to understand for a young guitarist starting out than getting into the more complex stuff. But I enjoyed them. I thought there was and Lemmy's bass playing as well on that early stuff was really really something special. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've always been into the whole cinematic sort of approach. So to be able to do something like this, like the first track on the album Vanishing Point is over 19 minutes long. And it has what's really interesting is we kind of with the way we've done this, it's like we'd kind of jam and then he'd develop it. Sometimes he'd sample some of my guitar phrases and um, then I'd do an additional layer. And what you finish up with, it is like a musical dialogue, really, where there's quite a lot of little melodies that kind of happen that they might only happen once, but they're still quite hooky. So when you do listen to the record the second or third time, you pick up on these things. And I think it's if you can do that, if you can have something that I mean, obviously, not having lyrics, not having a vocalist, it's you're trying to achieve something different from just a contemporary song. So it needs to be interesting and have enough themes to kind of hold people's attention, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure there are hooks in it and themes and motifs and things that keep the interest as it's evolving. But it's exciting when you get to have a project where you're taken out of your normal role, or just you're probably feeling much more like a kid when you were first starting with all the knowledge that you have now, but you're feeling like it's a fun, exciting new thing that you've place you've never been before.
Yeah, and I think what happens, it's all about musical chemistry. If you find someone who you do share a lot in terms of that musical vocabulary, but also um, can lead you down paths that you wouldn't otherwise have taken. One of the interesting things with this project, because I was flying to and from Berlin quite a lot, um, it's probably about 70%, maybe even more of the guitar on the album was through my quad cortex. Um, other stuff. I mean, I did take various pedals to run through the quad cortex as well, so it wasn't, just that. But to have something so powerful, it's something that you could just sling over your shoulder and carry on the plane was yeah, quite liberating, really.
Yeah. The it's amazing to me just how deep that pedal is. To call it a pedal is really kind of
Yeah,
but some of the sounds in there are so evocative of what kind of what we're talking about, this ambient layers of,
yeah.
but yet I can plug direct in with a bass and get some of the most amazing bass tones.
Yeah, that's what Pete's using at the moment for his bass rig.
Yeah.
He uses a quad cortex.
Yeah.
And when I do my solo shows, that's what I use. I use a quad cortex in a kind of hybrid rig, really. So I've got a little valve powered power amp, and I use a 4x12, and I still use a Roland JC120 for the old Marillion stuff because it's very much tied into that sound that only a JC120 makes, really.
Right. Yeah, there's something about having the convenience of the the quad cortex, but having that air move in speakers, and especially like a JC120, that has its a very special.
Yeah, because yeah, a lot of the stuff I do with especially with the older Marillion stuff, it's actually a DS1 emulation I'm running on the Cortex into like a delay and reverb. But it has to be you have to have that interaction between the guitar speaker and the body of the guitar to do what it should do. If for help it sustain, maybe for the harmonic to start to ring through. This whole idea these days of silent stages. I don't know. You could say it's not rock and roll, but a lot of the heavier bands are using them these days. But I think unless you have air moving on stage, you're only getting maybe two-thirds of the picture, really.
Yeah, I think that there's a, for us being a bit older, we've had experiences with playing a lot of different amps and we know what the original amps sound like. Younger guy, I don't know that they've had the experience of the different amps and what it feels like sonically with the cabinet
Yeah,
moving and how resonant a cabinet is and what that means in the in your spatial relationship to where you are. Just
yeah,
having that air moving and all the and the way the whether a guitar is resonant or not, it's having all those things is a huge. And if you've never experienced that,
yeah,
you're maybe not understanding why folks like still like to have the air move.
yeah. Like I say, for me, running a hybrid system is the best of both worlds. So you have all that power of the quad cortex at your disposal, but you still have that interaction between the body of the guitar and the sound coming out of the speaker. Um, I can't ever imagine just using it without that. It would just kind of feel soulless to me, I think. Um, but I mean, it works for some people, but I think it depends on the sort of music and the sort of parts you're playing. If you're just backing up someone and it's not really that important, I suppose. Yeah, it can be convenient. Uh, but yeah, but this whole obsession with clean stages, with like say silent stages, is apart from anything else. If you ever go and see one of those bands and from the side of the stage, all you can hear is the drum kit. It's a very very odd thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that there's been so many concessions made for front of house engineers to have the silent stages. And it's kind of
Mm.
like, having the tail wag the dog.
It is really, you know, it's got to be exciting, and I think the excitement of the band on stage translates to the excitement to the audience. There's a young, well, I don't know how young they are actually. There's a Canadian band I saw the other night that both my son and daughter are huge fans of, called Peach Pit. Um, and yeah, I mean, great guitarist, running around stage like a madman all the time. He's playing these in quite complex runs and stuff. I mean, yeah, hats off to the guy, and a great sound as well. And I think he was using a combination of an amp and I think a Helix to do his thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the I can see for some of the heavier progressive groups where there's so much note density and it just seems like it's just so much at you at one time. But if there
Yeah,
are subtle passages, uh, many of the things that you're doing in Marillion, where there's a bed of some sort, like a keyboard bed of,
yeah,
and then you're coming in with, playing more like a saxophonist would play with long tones, and you kind of need that
yeah.
feel motion or air moving.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of one of the ways I think my style's evolved. Is that you kind of approach it a little bit like a wind instrument. So you have those pauses for breath, um, and you give space in the music. But then when you want it to sustain, you want to have that feeling that not necessarily the most distorted, overdriven sound, but just to make the guitar sing.
Yeah. And I think that the guys that we fell in love with, the Steve Hackett, David Gilmour, those there was something in their playing that you could sing their parts, further fit.
Yeah.
There's something.
Well, I mean, oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, that's either the other project that I'm doing as well that's been ongoing for the last almost as long as the album with Thorsten. Is this album with Steve Hackett we've been working on and off for the last 5 years or so. And that's kind of really coming together now. We did a session at Steve's house a couple of weeks ago, and that was really nice. It's actually I'm trying to pull something out of him, um, and I think I'm very excited by what I'm hearing. I mean, I think the way that our two styles, he's a huge influence on me, but my style is different enough that we don't just kind of like cancel each other out, if you know what I mean. but to actually work with him with my keyboard player Ricardo Romano, he was kind of doing the recording and to get things out of him that I haven't heard for a long, long time. I mean, it's some really beautiful, emotive playing. So yeah, I'm excited for people to hear that as well at some point, hopefully later this year.
Yeah, the uh, legacy players like you and Steve, it's sometimes nice to have somebody that's collaborating with you that will bring out a side that maybe you've forgotten about, something that's deeply embedded in your musical DNA that for whatever reason you kind of pushed back. But it's great to hear that you're pulling something out of him that maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a different chemistry that he's used to. He's used to working with Roger, his keyboard player, for quite a long time, really. And Roger's obviously the MD in his live band and a very talented guy. But I suppose what I'm looking for is a more of a guitar-based record. I
Right.
mean, again, it's an instrumental record, at least so far, but something that it's really about the guitar and how um, it does something that you can't get from any other instrument, in my opinion, anyway.
Right. Yeah. The the nature of learning guitar when you're younger, and there's so we came up in a time when we had selling England by the pound. We had Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon. We had stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
all these things. It's interesting what you gravitate towards, and that really makes the most sense to you in terms of your sensitivities as a guitar player. Because simultaneously, you have some other, you have the Joe Perrys and the Edward Van Halen
Yeah.
and all those guys, but it was, arguably one of the most rich, fertile times for guitar playing all across the board, from jazz to progressive rock. And I'm kind of interested when you were picking up the guitar, were you learning things off records, maybe not exactly correctly, or how is that evolving for you as you're hearing all this stuff? What made you kind of go down that more melodic?
Um, yeah, I've been listening to loads of different players, really. I mean, Hendrix, Santana, the Beatles, huge influence. I mean, George Harrison, especially. Um, and then, yeah, discovering progressive rock, really, hearing The Knife when I was 15 on a rock radio show that we had in the UK at the time. And is falling in love with it, getting the Genesis live album, um, and discovering that Pink Floyd and Yes, um, Camel was a huge influence, Sandy Latimer, um, and yeah, just kind of falling in love with that style of playing. I mean, you got to remember, this is at the time the whole punk new wave thing was happening as well.
Right.
So, in my first band, which came up with school friends, really, they were all into the punk and new wave thing, and we'd have these listening sessions every Saturday night where people would play their favorite tracks, and they'd be playing something by the Damned or the Clash or something, and I'd be playing Return of the Giant Hogweed. So it's definitely when two worlds collide. Um, but yeah, that always just appealed to me. That whole what the music could do just seemed so much more interesting and exciting, really, to have music that didn't kind of correspond to those structures. When Wish You Were Here came out, that was the kind of thing that made me think, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do with my life.
Right.
When all the other guys in my band went off to art college or university, and I was stuck there in this small fishing town in the middle of nowhere. I saw the audition for Silmarillion, wanting a guitarist, and I drove in my little Renault 5, 250 miles down there, and got the gig and gave up my job, moved away from my friends and family, and rolled the dice, really.
Right. Yeah, because there's something to be said about rolling the dice and not having a plan B and just
Yeah,
having a plan B sometimes can be a big Achilles heel, because you tend to lean back into that when things get lean or difficult, or it's human nature to kind of go, well, I've got this thing with my family business, or I've got this
yeah, yeah.
in school, but when you plunge forward, I think music chooses us, and when you just go completely forward into it with no plan B, it
Yeah.
will happen.
Well, that's it. I mean, I always remember in the early days, the band 12th Night, they were a little bit older than us. They were all kind of university graduates. So they had that kind of intellectual smugness about them, I suppose, where, we were just kind of like, this is what we want to do. And myself, and especially Mick Pointer, um, that we were just focused on music. That's all we wanted to do, to be professional musicians. And you kind of work in whatever crummy jobs you had to do to kind of to pay the rent and buy new guitar strings, really.
Right. Yeah, that's something that always kind of surprised me about a band like Genesis. Them coming up, with the exception of Phil and Steve, uh, being in Charterhouse School, and
Yeah.
where they're from affluent families, and they definitely had a serious plan B, and having parents that would probably prefer them becoming something other than
Yes.
musicians. It was amazing
Yeah.
to me but at the time, the pull for them must have been that post World War II darkness, kind of uh, this very oppressive kind of heaviness to things. And then the Beatles come along, and it's like such
Yeah.
a ray of sunshine in an otherwise just awful thing.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, being at a public school and how repressive that must have been, and then discovering music and deciding you want to do that yourself. I mean, I think yeah, it's quite an incredible background that they came from, really. But yeah, I mean, just amazing musicians. Tony Banks, especially in the early stuff, really. But all of them, really. And then obviously when Steve and Phil joined, the chemistry between them and yeah, there's a power to some of that Genesis stuff that it's very different to any of the other prog bands of the time. I mean, maybe you could say with the whole Mellotron thing that they got from King Crimson, maybe, but um, you know, Pink Floyd was a lot more. You know, put on the headphones, skid up a joint in your bedroom, and immerse yourself in the sonic tapestry, where Genesis was almost like literature put to music.
Yeah, it did very much seem like a deeper dive. And back then, we were consuming music as you would consume a novel. We were setting
Yeah,
aside time to put the record on, headphones, liner notes, and just scouring through the album art to figure out where the hidden messages were. What little secret. For hours we would spend
yeah,
looking at these things. And when I was a kid, I was earning money through cutting grass and doing job, and I was taking my money to a local shop to get albums. I was buying the out because I didn't have any friends that were listening to R&B and
yeah,
funk
yeah,
kind of stuff growing up in the Midwest. So my album collection became like my poor man's art collection. It was all Storm Thorgerson stuff. So
yeah, yeah.
Storm was the person, my gateway person into this whole world, and I got to meet him the year before he passed. And
Right.
it was just very sweetheart of a guy, but crusty as you'd ever expect him to be, and cynical and sarcastic, but in a sweet kind of grandfatherly way. But all that
Yeah,
to say, there was something about these were our little novels. You know,
mm,
if you had Nursery Crime, or if you had Lamb Lies Down Abroad, any of those, it was like you're really immersing yourself, and it was
yeah,
that album could be something that would feed you for a year.
yeah. No, totally. And I think that's the thing that drew me into the progressive genre. Really, you wanted to do something that had that depth, and that had that freedom, and the audiences responded. Again, we came out at the tail end of the punk new wave movement, and by then there was a whole new generation had come through, and we became their thing. Maybe their older brothers were into the whole punk new wave thing, but they were, it was either us or the, what they called it, the new wave of British heavy metal. But yeah, there was always young generations coming through looking for music that's going to excite them. And it was, I think, we were quite a dynamic live act as well, and I think that intensity, especially with Fisher's performance, pulled people in, and then the music sort of finished them off, I suppose.
Yeah, it could. It's fair to put you guys side by side with Genesis, but there was something. There's a bit more of an edge from the live experience that that Fish brought to it. More of a, and I don't know his background, but uh, there was something cinematic and theatrical about it, but also a bit tough.
Yeah, a little bit darker. Yeah, he was influenced as much by Peter Hamill as he was Peter Gabriel, and I think because we'd come through the punk new wave thing, there was that sort of intensity to what we did, and maybe a lot of the music was more guitar focused than keyboard, depending on the track, really. But yeah, I know you see some of these the early videos from 81, 82, and we were a great live band. You could see why it would cross over to this new generation. Um, but yeah, many years ago.
Right. Well, I think the benefit of being a band based in England is there's so many gigs that you can get to by rolling. Is it the M6? The
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot less gigs around these days for young bands than there ever used to be. But yeah, we toured most of the kind of the rock clubs and pubs around the UK, and big tour of Scotland just after Fish joined. Um, and I think that, having that kind of grassroots following, when you then move up to the more serious shows like the Marquee Club in London, and you can sell out that show. And it's a place where all the record companies used to congregate. Charisma Records had the offices up above. Um, so yeah, you play to some of these people who were the movers and shakers in that world. And they took notice. Who is this band without a label that's selling out 3 nights at the Marquee?
yeah, yeah. There's nothing. It's not something that's readily available to younger bands like there was then for you to do that much. I mean, it was not unlike what the Beatles did with the amount of. I mean, by the time they got a record deal, they had logged. They had well done their 10,000 hours. Malcolm
Oh,
Clark,
totally. Yeah,
and I would say the same for you guys. I mean,
yeah,
there was so much touring, so much connection, but it's amazing when you have five people pushing in the same direction with the same goal, the same dream, same understanding of what it is we want to do.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And yeah, well, we were very lucky in the early days with the amount of publicity we got. We employed a guy called Keith Goodwin who'd worked with I think Yes and Vangelis, and very well known and respected in the industry. And he got us in some of the top music publications at the times, the Sounds and Melody Maker. And I think again that really helped. Then we did a session for Tommy Vance, who was a big rock DJ in the UK at the time. He had a Friday rock show, and he did sessions for various bands, and that again pushed us up another level, really.
Yeah, I think the thing that you've created is something that bands like Dream Theater looked to and thought because they kind of have that same kind of fan base that's just
Yeah.
uh, they're in it for life. And it's not just kind of fleeting thing. Yeah, I've got a couple Marillion records. No, the folks that
Yeah.
follow you guys, they want everything. They want the solo projects. If you're going to do a Marillion weekend and it means them traveling halfway across the globe to get there, they're there. You
Yeah.
put it up for sale, it's sold out. That's the kind of thing that comes from the thing that you guys have created. It's a very cool thing to have all these years down the road.
Well, that's it. Recording our 19th album, and not many bands get to do that. but I think even fewer have a consistency in their work where, you can still hold your head high when it comes to um, your recorded output, really. I think most bands have sort of said it all within 5 or 6 records, and then, it's plow the same ground, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. It the addition of Steve back in, I guess, '89 was it's such a difficult thing to. It's not unlike, I guess, not to keep droning on about but it's not unlike when Peter Gabriel leaves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a big change, and you're going to lose some people because not everyone can handle change or listen with an open mind. Um, But what we lost, we also gained because Steve's an amazing musician as well as being a singer and a lyricist. And it added an extra dimension to the music and gave the music more breathing space in a way.
Right. Yeah, I would think that connecting with fans of yours in that close. I've watched some of the stuff on YouTube of some of the Marillion weekends, and it's just like a dream come true for them, not only to be able to see the shows and have them be different shows, but have access to to you guys and to be able to to know their stories, because that it's a rich tapestry when you get to know people a little bit that have been following you since 1982, 1983, whatever it might be.
Well, that's it. There was a guy in the audience. I can't remember if it was Paris or Montreal, but he'd been to every single Marillion live show since forever. I don't know how he could manage that because some of these places we play are above and beyond, but apparently. So I think when you find music that resonates with you, and also when you make friends with like-minded people from around the world, I mean it's a cliche, but it becomes a global family. Um, and you see that especially at the Marillion weekends, and especially in Port Zealand, where we have the facility, and we have 3,000 fans from around the world, and it's an incredible experience.
Yeah, it's got to be something to whether they're singing along to one of whatever song it might be. You've got 3,000 people singing it back to you for their own personal
Yeah,
reasons, and that's the thing that I think is exciting for me about the bands, yourself, Pink Floyd, Genesis. The folks that are into that have had their lifetime as your music being the backdrop, and
yeah,
so many of the songs are imprinted into their consciousness of having the birth of a baby, the loss of a parent, a divorce.
exactly. Yeah. No, it does. It becomes chapters in their life, I suppose. It's like, and if there's a song that deals with whatever, love or grief or death. We played Estonia at my mother's funeral because it just seemed appropriate. Um, so when you become that, you become a soundtrack to people's lives. You're always going to have a very special place in their hearts, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's got to be very rewarding to when individual members of the group want to do another project, whether it's your project or whether it's Pete going off and doing transatlantic or whatever it might be, Steve's whatever doing a solo project. It's the fact that they want to follow you and check that out too and embrace that is
Yeah, I think maybe not all the Marillion fans would do that, but I think quite a large percentage of them, and it's great to have that support because it's so tough out there for most bands. It's harder and harder to make a living from music. I mean, we're lucky because we've been going for so long that we have different income streams and we can get by, and the Marillion weekends as well. But for a lot of bands, a couple of stages further down the ladder, it's a struggle. And then if for a new band, it's virtually impossible.
yeah, yeah. I another thing I was kind of curious about is you strike me as somebody that is inspired by from a lot of different things. Besides music, there's probably film, literature, things that are
Yeah.
infusing your sensibilities as a songwriter. I'm kind of curious if there's anything recently that has been particularly inspirational or something that you would recommend us to check out that might spark some interest.
Oh, that's hard to say. I'm a big sci-fi fan. Favorite things of recent years, The Expanse, I loved. I'm currently near the end of Severance,
Uh,
which is it's been quite a trip.
it's funny that you say because that was as I said that that was the thing that I've been so deep into that I finished it. Now I'm watching the podcast or listening to the
Right.
and it's my wife loved it too, but she's kind of like I don't know what you're droning on about. Why are you getting so deep? I'm like, there's something
Yeah.
deeper to this whole idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely it pulls you in. We're down to the last three episodes, so hopefully by the end of the weekend I'll get to finish it. But yeah, that's been one of the most interesting things in recent times. Um, it's you're always on the lookout for things to inspire you, be it literature or film, TV, or other music. You're always. I think all musicians are kind of hungry to soak up something that's going to inspire them.
Yeah. Are there any instruments that lead you down into interesting chord that maybe you don't play a lot, but that
Uh,
you come
well,
up?
there's a track on the Bioscope album called Kaleidoscope where I play bass on it. And that was fun. I love playing bass. I mean, I play bass on "Don't Hurt Yourself" on the Marbles album. Um, but it's something I really enjoy. I got this little orange bass preamp. It's got two channels. It's got like a clean with an optical compressor and like an overdriven channel. And you record the two channels separately, then you can blend them together depending on kind of what you're looking for. And I did the bass, like I say, for this Kaleidoscope track, and is this good enough? Should I get somebody who knows what they're doing in? And I thought, no, I think it's good enough, and it's got my sensibilities in it. It's a little bit McCartney, it's a little bit Chris Squire, it's a little bit John Entwistle, So it was fun to do.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of just finding things that keep it fun and exciting. Like there's something about returning to your roots as a kid and getting that kind of excitement because the bigger things get and the more expectations, especially in a very successful legacy group like Marillion, you have a very specific role, but when you can break out of that and do something that returns to making it feel like, man, this is uncharted territory,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it was like that when I did my first solo album, the Ghost of Pripyat album, and went out and played that with my band. And yeah, just the excitement you get playing with amazing musicians who are also amazing people, and playing it live to an audience. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. I think when that album came out, maybe 2015, does that sound right?
Yeah, it's about that.
That
Yeah.
I I was flying uh, from Dallas to Cincinnati, where my band is based. We were in a Pink Floyd tribute group, and I was flying five, six. Well, I'm not a normally touring musician, but I was flying so much. That was the most because I hate flying.
Right, right.
That was the Bose noise canceling headphone thing that I would album that I would listen to.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you.
It's
Thank you.
the most amazing experience. It was like, just such a calming thing. It's
Yeah.
not just because I'm talking to you, but it's one of my favorite albums to for traveling because I
Yeah. No, I can understand. I've had a few people that say they love to listen to it when they're working, like in the office,
I
to
think
have it
Morpheus
on.
was the one that was I believe it's a track called Morpheus.
Yeah, yeah. The first track with Steve
Yeah,
Hackett and
yeah. I just man. So anyway, all that to say, just if it's amazing what that can do to you. It seems like it rearranges your genetics, your DNA, so you can just get into a space where you are relying.
Yeah. Well, I wanted it to do what music always did for me, for all those players, whether it be Dave Gilmour or Steve Hackett or Andy Latimer, and take you somewhere, And I think that was my idea with that album. And it was born out of this offer to do the Plovdiv Guitar Festival. And originally it was just going to be me, my guitarist Dave, and a drum machine. And then they said they wanted us to play an hour and a quarter, and I thought, well, that's just not going to work for that length of time. So we better write some music, and yeah,
But
so it evolved.
I don't think I typically will do this, but I don't think I had looked up what the meaning of that, what that.
Well, Morpheus is a god of sleep.
No. I
So,
mean, the title of the album.
oh, the Ghost of Pripyat. Pripyat is the village in the Ukraine, actually, where the Chernobyl reactor was based.
Oh, okay.
So obviously, when they had the terrible accident there, many tens of thousands of people died, and I mean the ghost. It's kind of like it had multiple meanings. It's like you could say to people that died in the nuclear meltdown. It's or the people that died afterwards when they went to clear out the topsoil in thousands of acres, and all these people subsequently passed away. It's the fact that there's people living now within the area that's kind of outside the law. They're not in any government census or anything. They're kind of yeah, they're sort of living in this really strange sort of twilight zone. So yeah, it had a few meanings, really. Uh, and the funny thing was that I was originally going to start out the tour for that album with a show in Kiev, in the Ukraine, followed by a show in Moscow. Um, and then Russia invaded Ukraine, and both those shows got cancelled. But,
Yeah, it's art tries to make sense of things for us or put us in a better space, but yeah, the outside world has a way of.
yeah, well, music is it's a way of escaping how spectacularly shitty the world is for a lot of people. Um, but that's all you can do. There's a little acoustic part that I wrote a while ago, which was inspired, by events in the Ukraine. Um, and when the mothers and children were sheltering in the basement of the steelworks that was being shelled and constantly by the Russians, and it was like it was. Wait, it might still come out. I don't know. It was going to be a lullaby for a Ukrainian mother and child, but it was this very sort of gentle, rolling, open detuning sort of acoustic part. So sometimes, even terrible things can inspire beauty.
Yeah. I must say that when I did read that you and Steve were, uh, I know that there's a friendship that exists. I got to interview him uh, probably about a year ago, and
Oh, cool.
just a sweetheart of a guy. But the point of this is when I heard about the two of you working together, I thought that's such an amazing story because here's somebody, maybe not your major influence, but somebody who was had a big part in your
Yeah,
having a guitar,
he was.
and now to be collaborators, to being peers, to but more importantly, being friends and being mates.
Yeah.
That's
No, that's the thing.
that's a very
It,
special thing. I mean, it's probably not uh, ever lost on you. The 14-year-old Steve is going, wow, how did I end up here? This is pretty awesome.
yeah, well, one of the things we did, how many years ago now? It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We went up to Whitby in North Yorkshire, which is where I grew up. And I showed him kind of around the town, and we kind of looking for inspiration. And one of the tracks on the album together. It's called Sands End, which is a place just down the coast from Whitby, which I spent a lot of my childhood in. But I was thinking, if you could have told the 15-year-old me that 40 years later, or 30 odd years later, I'd be walking around with Steve Hackett, showing him these places that I grew up. It's just totally wild. It's totally crazy.
Yeah, and for him to be able to speak lovingly about what you do and uh, recognize you as a peer and a friend, that's
Yeah.
heartwarming.
No, he's a lovely human being, as is his wife Jo. I mean, he's so humble. I played with him at the Royal Albert Hall a few months ago. And he when I was around there a few weeks ago, he was saying he'd been listening to the sound, and it was just so complimentary about my playing. It was it's quite strange, really, to have someone that's been such a major part of my development to be so complimentary.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you probably conversely will run into players that are doing this for a living that cite you as an influence, and and for them it's a very special thing to be able to just thank you for being there for them and getting, even though they may not have played exactly like you, because you never can tell how your playing's going to completely arrive because we're an amalgam of these different players.
Yeah. No, it's funny though, because I do. There's some of the YouTubers that demonstrate guitars. There's a guy in particular who I spoke with, well, I exchanged some emails with him because I bought an amplifier for him, and he said he was I was a huge influence on him, and when you watch him demonstrating some gear, you can see him the chords he's playing. He said, "Oh yes, I know exactly where you got that from." So it's nice to think that what you've done. Because I'm not a technical musician, so I'm not going to be spoken of in the same breath as the technician, players out there. But I think I've got my own way of expressing myself through the guitar and my own approach chordally, and it's nice to get some recognition for that. I did a thing called the Pedal Show as well about 9 months ago, and that's had a lot of great response from people. Lovely comments on the YouTube video. Um, so yeah, it's nice to think that you know some people understand what you're trying to do.
Well, I think the best thing that you can say is that if you're at a show, a Marillion show, that when your solos are coming up, people are queuing. They're okay. They're leaning in, and they're like, okay, let's hear.
Yeah,
This is going to be great, and people are, oh, here comes a solo. It's you see
yeah,
it
yeah.
happening, and that's to me that's the biggest sign that that's what we want to do. We want to get across to folks, and we don't. I always tell my students that if you try to impress other guitar players, it's a road to nowhere because
Well, that's it. Yeah.
you might be able to wow a few people, but generally speaking, guitar players are not who you're trying to impress.
No, if you want a fantastic technique, go on YouTube and there'll be an 11-year-old player somewhere in the world who's shredding
Right.
better than all those legends you've grown up with. Um, but for me, the beauty of the guitar is it's a fact that it can convey emotion uh, as much as any other instrument, really, maybe with the exception of the human voice. And that's what should be important, emotion and melody and atmosphere and it's like that's what makes the guitar unique, not how fast you can shred or how technical I mean some of these players these days it becomes more like mathematics than music for me, and they're playing, and all the other young guitarists will be like, oh wow, oh, ooh, incredible players, but where's the music, where's the melody, where's the tunes, whistle me that you know
Right. Yeah, I also teach an adult school of rock program, and students always get concerned with being able to play really fast stuff. And I said, if you can go in front of an audience and play something like the intro to Shine On You Crazy Diamond,
Yeah.
there's a big G minor pad and you've got to play this
Yeah.
intro. If you can nail that with good tone and vibrato and emote,
Yeah.
that is worth 10 eruptions by Van Halen.
Ex exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's bending and vibrato is what gives us our voice on the guitar. And if you can nail that, I mean, that's my whole criteria with playing. It's a hand position that gives me maximum control over that, over bending and vibrato. Not that's going to make it easiest to fast legato passages or sweep picking or anything really. It's how can I squeeze a maximum amount of emotion from each note. Um, and so that will compromise my hand position for playing the fast stuff, but that's fine with me because I don't want to really do that.
Yeah. It's amazing that when we find out how these players come out in our play, where you might be improvising something for or laying down a solo for something, and you might go, man, that's a George Harrison thing. I know where the way that I'm phrasing, whether it's a long solo or a short solo, or that's Andy Latimer or whomever, you get these
Oh
little,
yeah, yeah.
every once in a while, these little sparkly things. It's like, oh shit, I know where that's from.
Yeah, the thing is just to steal from as many people as possible, and then you will automatically become a mixture of those. And at different moments, you will hear the influence of specific players, but it's not like you're not inhabiting them, if you know what I mean. You kind of like you're taking. Because one of the things I never really did that you said about learning stuff. I never really kind of went into the whole learning note for note thing. It was more like trying to absorb the feeling that certain players would give you. Um, and I think that that's kind of nobody wants to just become a clone of their favorite player, really. Well, you can do, and for some people that's all they aspire to. But for me, that's a pretty pointless exercise. You want to try and take that and merge it with something else.
Yeah, yeah, that's the true excitement is when you're. I've heard more guitar players say that the thing that was exciting to them was a failed attempt at this thing, but the essence of it led them into a piece that was a cornerstone for a tune that they wrote.
Yeah, yeah,
Something that you can't do is going to lead it. So that's so much more exciting to have your own thing in the end,
yeah.
to have your own voice, to have your own, rather than just being a carbon copy guy.
Yeah, yeah, and tone, caring about your tone is so important. And even if you are using a modeler, it's just really taking the time to dial it in. And certain guitars work best with certain amps, and I think work best with certain modelers. So it's kind of finding that they've been on that journey really, where everything you do, you try and make as good as humanly possible, be it your playing or your sound or your sense of pitch, trying to really fine tune that. So if you're bending and your guitar goes out of tune, you overbend to compensate and you can hear when you're in the sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that is lost if you're just working on becoming speed merchants. You
Yeah.
know, all the phrasing, all the nuance of the, you know, for me, sometimes just putting my pick down and playing with my fingers and trying to
Yeah.
not play a Jeff Beck thing, but try to play something that puts me in that spirit of
Yeah.
Jeff or whomever it might be. But yeah, it's thank you so much for your time. I don't want to monopolize your day. It's been an
Yeah, no.
honor
Got to
to
go
have
and do some final shopping for Easter before my son and daughter arrive tomorrow.
you. Wonderful. Very sweet.
Oh, it's okay. Well, good to speak to you anyway.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Great week. Happy Easter.
Cheers, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Guitar Hang podcast. And a very special thanks to Steve Rothery to kick off season 8, episode 1, and giving us a behind-the-scenes look at Bioscope and his ongoing work with Rothery. If you dug this episode, hit follow